Illinois add another piece to the men's basketball roster. Quincy Guerrier announced and pledged his verbal commitment to Illinois. He is a grad transfer, spent 2 years at Syracuse, 2 years at Oregon, and is now coming to Champaign. He was on a visit this weekend. I'm assuming he didn't take any other visits. He never really released a list. It was really Illinois, and unless something went terribly wrong on his visit, it was going to be Illinois, and it is. He averaged 9 points, 4.6 rebounds, shooting 42.3% from the field last season for Oregon. That was not his most productive season. His sophomore year at Syracuse, he averaged 13.7 points and almost 9 rebounds, 8.5 rebounds. And then his junior year at Oregon, his first year there, more than 10 points a game and more than 5 rebounds a game. But his 3-point percentage has improved each of his 4 years of college to a 34.7% clip last year. He's a 6'8", 220-pound forward from Montreal, Canada. This is the same guy that, I don't know if you remember, they were recruiting out of Syracuse. They were a top choice for him out of Syracuse.
This is the third time they've been high on
Yes. Yeah, they wanted him
out. They were high on him out of high school, too.
Yep. They wanted him out of high school, and he went to Syracuse. Then they wanted him out of Syracuse, and he went to Oregon. So now third time's a charm. But this is the guy that there was an assistant coach opening at the time that they were recruiting, and this was during COVID. So you couldn't go on visits, I don't think, or there were some restrictions. And reports were that they had a Zoom call, and an assistant coach was on the Zoom call.
And forgot about that. I forgot that's who this was.
Backed out. The coach, I think his name was Alan Huss. He was at Creighton.
Yep.
And apparently pledged his job change to Brad Underwood in Illinois. He was recruiting Guerrier, and then change of heart, no longer recruiting Guerrier, and Guerrier went to Oregon. I don't know if that had anything to do with the decision, but every time I hear that name, that's the story I think of, is that Illinois had an assistant coach recruiting for them who never ended up coaching for Illinois. So that's this guy. What do you think about Quincy Guerrier?
That connection. I mean, at first I was a little, I don't want to say I was surprised. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting. This offseason recruiting transfer portal cycle has been rather, I don't want to say odd, but it's been different. This has been a different type of offseason than what we saw, say, last year from Brad Underwood and his staff. I like the addition. I like the addition of Guerrier. I think that he can fill a couple different spots, and he can play with a few different players. There's still a lot of question marks with this team. We're starting to put the pieces together, but there are still 2 giant holes. Well, 3 really giant holes on this roster that we're just not sure who's filling those spots. But what this does is this gives you another, I'd probably still call him a wing, but he's a bigger wing. He's going to end up playing the 4, which is probably where he's better suited. I do believe out in Oregon the last couple of years, they had some other big guys that he was playing next to. So he was kind of playing really more on the wing, more than he probably should be. But he comes in, he's going to bring experience. Again, that's kind of been the theme of this offseason. The 3 transfers that Brad's brought in have all been experienced guys, all guys that have played. I think they've all played 4 years of college basketball. So it's going to be an old team, and there's still a lot more potential out there for age and experience to return. So it's a nice get. I like how he fits. I think he can fit next to Coleman if Coleman comes back. If he doesn't, he can play next to Dane, or if they're able to go out and get an even better center option. If Coleman doesn't come back, I think he can play next to that guy too. So nice fit. He can shoot the 3 a little bit, as you alluded to. Those numbers have improved. I don't think he's going to be a dead eye shooter by any stretch of the imagination, but he's somebody that can step out and hit a 3 when necessary. So I like it. I like the addition.
Yeah, I think the number one thing and the most important thing is something you mentioned: experience. How many times last season did we hear Brad say we're one of the youngest teams in college basketball? We're one of the youngest teams in the Big Ten. That's not going to be the case this year.
Well, far from the case.
Domask has 4 years of college basketball. Guerrier has 4 years of college basketball. Harmon only had 2. He's coming in as I believe, as a junior. I think he only played 2 years at Utah Valley.
Didn't
I just
he
looked
play
at his
2 years at
ESPN.
JUCO?
Oh, is that okay? ESPN doesn't have that, so that might be true. So he's got 4
think
years of
so.
college basketball, and then you add that with Goody, who missed most of the last year.
He played
But a
2
lot of the
years
key
at
pieces.
Barton Community College.
Okay, so this is his 5th year. So a lot of these pieces have college basketball experience, which I think Brad did not like last year that he rolled with such a young team. So that's number 1. Number 2, when I saw that he was visiting and looked at some stuff, my immediate thought was, and I think I texted you this.
You did.
He is very similar to Terrence Shannon Jr., which makes me believe Terrence Shannon Jr. is not coming back. Some of the stuff I've watched and read since then has made me come off of that a little bit, but I still think they're very similar players. So I don't know how that impacts things. I also like that Brad went out and got this guy now and didn't wait for Terrence and Coleman, because that can put you in a bind. If you're waiting on these guys to decide and then they don't come back and you miss out on Guerrier or you miss out on some of these other guys, then you're really behind the 8 ball. So with this edition alone, I'm much more comfortable with the roster next year. Still need 2 more pieces. There's still 2 more pieces that you need.
3.
But
maybe.
But as the roster stands now, I'm continuing to be confident heading into next year.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from on the Terrence Shannon comp. I can see that to an extent, and we'll see what Brad actually says when he's officially able to comment on Quincy. But it sounds like the thought is that he is really more of a post.
It sounds like he's more of a 4 than a 3.
Yeah, that's the thing here. It sounds like he's been playing the 3. And again, we'll see how the roster continues to be constructed, who they're able to bring back, who they're able to bring in to go along with him. But from what I've read and from what I've seen and heard, it sounds like, the thought is that they want him to play the 4, whereas Terrence is very obvious a 2-3 wing, true wing. So I do think they're a little different in that sense. I think, again, not really sure where we're going here. I wonder if Terrence is the more likely of the 2 to return at this point. I don't know. Obviously, neither of us are insiders, and we're just kind of going off of what other people are saying. But it sounds like there might be more of a chance of that happening. So, as I said, I see where you're coming from. I do think when it comes down to it, I think they both are kind of wings in that sense. But Quincy has an inch or 2 on Terrence. He's probably not going to be as quick. Doesn't go downhill as quickly. He's probably going to be able to play more of the 4 in a system where you're going to be looking for that. You're going to be looking for somebody that can step in and play that spot, especially if Coleman doesn't come back. We'll have to see.
Yeah, that thing that the thing that made me back off of that comp is just looking at his stats at Syracuse compared to Oregon. His second year, the 2021 season, he took almost 300 shots. He took 291 shots. Only 74 of them were 3-point attempts.
Yeah.
The last 2 years at Oregon, he's taken 286 shots in 2022 and 260 shots in 2023. 159 of them in 2022 were threes. 144 last season were threes. So he was playing behind the arc at Oregon, whereas only a fraction, just more than 200 of his shots at Syracuse his sophomore year were inside the arc. So he was asked to play 2 different styles. So I'm thinking Illinois might have him go back more to that Syracuse style of play, which he had his best season that 2021 year where he had averaged 13.7 and 8.4. If Illinois can get that from him, holy cow, that's an outstanding stat line. Almost 14 and 9. That's great.
Yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be great to get that. He's clearly coming to Illinois because he thinks that he can help raise his stock, build more of a future for himself here. If they can get him back to those numbers, that would be ideal. I haven't gone through the numbers at Oregon, to know exactly who he was playing with, but I do know there was some size there. We just talked about the Ware kid who's transferring to Indiana. He was a 7-footer. They had another guy that was 6'11", 7-foot that I know played good minutes for him. So I as I said, I think Guerrier was just kind of, I don't know if he was playing out of position, but I think he probably was playing outside a little more just because they had size. There was more size on, I mean, Illinois has never seen a roster like that with multiple 7-footers. So, they weren't used to that, and they were both playing at the same time. So, a little different.
According to KenPom, Oregon's most frequent lineup over their last 5 games of the season had Guerrier at the 3, 16.5% of the time. 10.4% of the time he was at a 4 in their number 2 lineup, and then the next one he was at a 4 at 9.9% of the time. So, for the most part, he was playing the 4. It looks like, but they were playing 4 out. So We'll see. I like it. It's experience. It's a guy that's played college basketball. It fits the roster. It's a guy that they had a relationship with. No, they hadn't coached, but they had recruited twice. This is the 3rd time they've recruited him. So he at least had a relationship there with Brad. So I think it's a good addition. Still 2 more pieces needed. Still need the point guard. Have not heard any movement on that front, and still need a big. Still need another big. They missed out on a couple guys that committed this week. I know Caden Shedrick from Virginia, who Illinois was never really in on. He committed to Texas. And then there was a guy out of Texas Tech that I really liked. He was like a 7-footer, had a long wingspan, but he committed to Louisiana Tech. So instead of going high major to high major, I think he wanted to go somewhere where he was going to kind of get featured more and didn't want to be a backup or just another piece. But I think a backup big, or a starter, if you can find it, and a point guard are still at the top of the list.
You want another big, even if Coleman comes back, or are you just
that could be Coleman? Could be Coleman.
Okay, I see. I get what you're saying. Yeah, because if Coleman comes back, I don't know that there's a lot of minutes for another big unless Dane leaves. Because you already have Hansberry, and I don't know how much he's going to play as a freshman, but we're in this era where if freshmen think they're entitled to more minutes than they're actually getting, then you got to figure out how to toe that line.
Yeah. At this point,
a conversation for a different day. But I mean,
at this point, you need Coleman or Shannon to come back and a point guard. You need one of the 2 guys to come back and a point guard.
Yes, and I think if Shannon doesn't come back, you got to go after. You might have to go find something else. Yeah, because I don't know where your points are going to come from.
Yeah.
There's some guys on this team that can score. I mean, we know what Domask was able to do at the Valley. Yeah. We'll see how that translates. Same thing with Justin Harmon. I mean, he could score at the mid-major level, but I don't know how either of those guys are going to translate into Big Ten points. We haven't seen Luke Goody consistently to know what he's going to give you. Sincere Harris and Ty Rogers are great players, but they're not going to give you points. So unless the point guard you bring in is going to be a bucket, you might, if Terrence doesn't come back, you might have to go out and find somebody else too.
Yeah,
I don't know who that's going to be.
That's a good point.
I mean, we're going to get another wave of the portal stuff after the draft stuff comes back, and all these guys here,
I think it's like a month away. End of May.
All these guys that are testing the draft waters are going to, either decide that they're going to stay in the draft or they're going to come out of the draft, and if they're going to stay at their school or they're going to transfer, and that's where the point guard's going to come from. And then obviously Illinois is waiting on their own 2 guys to make those decisions. But yeah, I think if Terrence doesn't come back, I think they almost have to go out and find somebody else. I don't know who it'll be. Maybe they don't. Maybe they run with it. But I'd be a little skeptical of that. Just I don't know where your points are coming from. So
good point. Anything else Illini basketball?
No. It's one of those. It's weird because I just feel like every week there's something. Last week there wasn't. It was a really quiet week last week. But 2 weeks ago we had we had 2 signings in one day or back-to-back days or whatever it was. Now this, so it's not necessarily going to be an every week thing, but I think every couple weeks you can probably expect some sort of news. So I like what's building here. I like what Brad's building. Still a lot of work to do, but you just got to play the waiting game. I had somebody ask me last week, what do I think's going on here? And we're in that stage where everybody is waiting on the NBA stuff. and the NBA season is still very much going on. So teams aren't necessarily all fully invested into this stuff, and there are deadlines for everything. So I do think the point guard is probably waiting out his time with the NBA stuff, as are Terrence and Coleman, and then whoever else Brad's able to bring in is probably also waiting on those decisions.
Yeah. I can't think of anything off the top of my head nationally. Hunter Dickinson has not committed anywhere. There were a couple big commits this past week, but none of them that impacted Illinois really. So I don't think there's much other else to talk about on the basketball front.
RJ Melendez.
RJ Melendez did commit to Georgia. Yeah. High major to high major there.
Brandon Lieb to Illinois State.
Brandon Lieb to Illinois State. Yeah. The other two walk-ons I haven't seen anything on. Servin and Warden. So yeah, that's where the former Illini are going.